Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Terminally Online Gamers. I am your host, Night Sky Prince, aka Ryan. We're joined again by Schrodinger's baby seal, aka Clarke. And now we have a brand new co-host joining us. Welcome to the team. Darryl, please tell everyone a little bit about you, a little bit about Final Fantasy Union, and what you do on YouTube.
Hello, yes, my name is Darryl. I run a YouTube channel called Final Fantasy Union, which, as the name suggests, is about Final Fantasy. I've been doing it for about coming up to 10 years now, which is quite scary. But yeah, we do a lot of different things relating to the franchise, mostly nostalgic-based content. Stuff that's easy to digest, but we also go super deep as well with really hardcore lore-based stuff, investigations into the company, the people that make the games as well. So yeah, it's just a good time. Just a good time.
Yes, man. You guys dive super deep into Square Enix, and even I, someone who also does this for a living, you always manage to find things that surprise me. A lot of things that kind of get obscured in history through just it being so long, and then a Japanese interview that no one read here in the West. And, there's just so many layers to Square's history that is really difficult to uncover. And you guys, let's just go the extra mile to uncover all of it.
Yeah, there is, especially in Square's history throughout the early 90s, there is so much stuff that hasn't really made itself into the Western view. Because a lot of it was just in Japanese magazines that are mostly hidden now. And some really wild stuff in there that I found over the years. The Final Fantasy IV comic that started doing the rounds because the artist and the writer started talking about it on Twitter. There was a whole thing about it in Famitsu. They had all the concept designs for all the characters, all of the backgrounds and all the story that these characters were going to have. I'd never seen that anywhere in terms of people. I mean, the first people really heard about it was when he started talking about it, and then I was like, "There's so much more to this. There is so much more to this story, and it's all in Japanese magazines."
Yeah, that's crazy. Nowadays, I feel like we get fairly decent communication with Japanese developers, right? You have Hideo Kojima on Twitter. You have a lot of Japanese developers that will much more willingly, openly communicate. Naoki Hamaguchi, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, also on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's cool that he can just like
Yoko
my
Taro.
Yeah. And it's also awesome too that you'd expect maybe they would talk more about in-depth stuff, but a lot of the times Yoko Taro, it's just shitpost about various different things. I love it.
AI, right, was the most recent one. He was just talking about that, and and he just goes on just some tangents, but that's why he's so great. And
Nojima too talked a lot about AI recently. I'm not sure if you caught any of that.
I did catch a little bit about that. Could you explain what Nojima was talking about?
Well, he basically says that for a lot of his work, he uses Chat GPT to kind of help him with outlines and stuff like that. He did make a very clear statement that I wouldn't write anything, in using Chat GPT, but that it's a good tool. And it was very. I don't want to say it was tone deaf, but it was tone deaf.
It's a nuanced conversation.
It's a nuanced conversation that he didn't necessarily apply a ton of nuance to.
But I think the Japanese developers, things are very different over there, right? I mean, they're still very going into Web3 games, NFTs, Symbiogenesis, for example. Square Enix's random NFT is still going, and they're still signing new partnership deals. While they've cancelled all these other games, that one's still trucking.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
And Tabata, the guy who directed Final Fantasy 15. You audio only listeners can't see I have a giant Noctis thing behind me, but the man, the myth, the legend, Hajime Tabata, dude is going really hard on Web3 and AI stuff. And so I know you've gone down like that whole rabbit hole too, right, Daryl?
I mean, I remember talking to that about that interview with you that he did, where he was very critical of like NFT Web3 games, and how exploitative and manipulative they are typically, and that he was going to change it all and make a game that was a game first and had those elements in there second. I don't know if that game's ever actually going to exist, but, but it was a noble statement.
So we're going to come back to Square Enix stuff in a minute because I do want to talk a little bit more about that topic with you guys. But first, did you guys see the Metacritic scores for Elden Ring Nighreign? It's like a little bit lower than what I was anticipating.
Yeah, and just on side alone, I was expecting low 80s. I always kind of was like, there was something about the reveal that was like, one, it was at the Game Awards, which, because of the scope of Elden Ring's previous DLC, it was included as a potential nominee for Game of the Year, which was a very divisive choice and generated a lot of discourse. People were kind of upset that DLC qualified. And, there's arguments to be made on both sides. I personally was like, I kind of feel like this, there's a whole category for that. I don't know why are we here? But so there was this kind of, I don't want to say, tint on the feeling about Elden Ring as it was, but for them to show a Elden Ring-esque, expansion or standalone title at that award kind of soured I feel like the reception of what it was from the get. And so I sort of expected low 80s, mid 80s, but still it's a FromSoft game. Elden Ring is still, a heavily played game. The online community of and PvP aspects of Elden Ring are still very much alive. So I was expecting, the game to get a little bit more of a charitable, view. So I was surprised a little bit, and I've read, a good chunk of the reviews now, and I do think that there's a little bit of Souls fatigue that's just happening, and I don't like to necessarily say that those trends are real. I don't want to give too much weight to the idea that we burn out on entire genres as a society, but there is always this little 5%, we're burnt out on open world games. We're burnt out at different phases, and then something will come in and sweep it out. There are ways to oversaturate a genre within gaming, especially like in a mature market that we're at. So I do think there's a teeny tiny bit of Souls fatigue happening right now. But also I just think that you compare what this experience is to, say, a full turnkey experience like Elden Ring, or even its expansion, and have it in this very specific, hard to play sort of multiplayer only situation, and that probably more lent itself to why this game didn't meet maybe
it's
a
essentially
critical marker.
A spin-off, right? It's an experiment for them, and I think that, if we're going to make a really weird comparison based on the fact that you have that poster behind you, it's very similar to what they did with Comrades, like the multiplayer expansion of 15. It's the same game, conceptually very different though. And even after the beta, I think people from that decided whether they liked that game or not, because a large chunk of the Elden Ring community liked the fact it's a single player experience, you can do it at your own pace, and Elden Ring Nighreign is like the complete antithesis of that. It's a game where you are rushed to do this as quickly as possible, and I think on that basis alone, it seems like a very hard game to even review, because you have to get the best of the experience, you have to play with two other very competent people who are roughly the same skill level as you, and be very well coordinated. And I would imagine that if you have that, like if you've got two mates who are like really hardcore Elden Ring fans or Souls fans, and you're fully invested in it, and you've got like strategic things you're going to work on, it's probably a fantastic, phenomenal experience. But if you're not in that very specific situation, then it's a game that is probably going to be difficult to like, because like I've heard from a solo perspective, it's very disjointed because there's no coordination, unique coordination, and even like because there's no 2-player mode either, right? Like there's just decisions they've made around it. But I think it's one of those games, where like some people are going to absolutely love it and think it's the best thing ever, and it's going to be great for them. But I think it's one of those things where people are looking at this thinking like, I like Elden Ring, so I'm going to like this, and I don't think it was ever really intended to be that way. It's very much a spin-off that's its own thing. And also, if we're being conspiracy theorists here, Clarke, it could be to help counteract that Souls fatigue, right? Because it's not really a Souls game. It kind of is, but it isn't.
Sure.
And they've got the Duskbloods as well, which is more along the multiplayer angle.
I think a lot of this has to do with, they've got assets. They're trying to figure out what to do before they enter the realm of Switch 2. Like that's a very different market. They really need to figure out, how to make a, PvE type game with its own lore, its own assets, its own, essentially its own design flow, right? Its own, own asset flow, make that work. And so it does feel like, maybe a little bit of a cash grab and a no-brainer, but also a beta test for a different project. And I think people felt that in the reviews and felt like a little cheated about that. Like, should I tell somebody to spend $40 on this?
Yeah, and I think, if you've got those 2 friends, then probably yes, it's a good investment. If not,
two friends and an understanding of a way to communicate with them, because this apparently does not have in-game communication that's good at all.
Yeah, you're going to have to be on like a separate thing, like fully coordinated. I think the interesting thing about this is that because of FromSoft's success recently, there's a huge spotlight on them now, and everyone expects everything they do to be just an absolute hit.
Right.
But they've done this stuff all the time. Like, I think, wasn't there like a Demon Souls or Dark Souls VR game, for example, right? They have like experimented in different ways with different things, and it's pretty much guaranteed that right now they're working on some other big project that is going to follow up Elden Ring as the proper, true successor to whatever it is they're going to do next. And this is just a way for them to just experiment with some stuff, explore, maybe make some capital. I don't know why they would need that necessarily based on how successful they've been. But I think it's a game that is probably going to do okay for them. And that's all it really needs to do until the next big thing that comes along that people are actually going to judge them on.
For sure. And I do want to touch on Souls fatigue again really quickly, because I think that's a pretty fascinating topic. Because right now what we're seeing is kind of a resurgence of hack and slash games. Right. And, you go on social media, and every time, a new action game is announced, there's almost like this collective sigh of relief where people are like, oh, thank God it's not like a Souls game. Now, personally, I do like a lot of games that are Souls-likes, and I'm more on the Souls side. But do you guys think that we've hit a point where Souls fatigue is becoming widespread? And if so, does FromSoft need to stick with what they're doing? Do you think that they should try something more experimental with their next game? Darryl, what do you think on this?
I don't think it's quite as bad as it's kind of being made out to be, because we have some really big Soulsborne-esque games coming up, and everyone is still massively hyped for them. Phantom Blade, I know they're trying to distance themselves from the genre, but that's very much what people believe it is. And, there is mass hype around that game. There's the Wu Chang as well, which is coming out in July, I think, which is one of the most followed wishlisted games coming up. So clearly people want it. I think it's the variety, what type of experience is it going to be within the genre. But there also aren't massive amounts of them still. FromSoft are still very much the biggest player. If you're thinking about the second biggest IP in the space, I mean, Black Myth obviously has kind of come into that a little bit now, but then you're looking at Neo. there hasn't really been anyone else who has been able to really make stake a claim in the way that other genres have been through. And it's usually what happens, right? There is a moment in time where a game comes into view, and then everyone's like, okay, we need to try and replicate that. But very rarely does that ever get surpassed. Very rarely does the original one ever get surpassed. I mean, we're seeing it right now with the roguelike deck builders. Every single game right now that's being announced is a roguelike deck builder of some shape or form. And none of them, I don't even think Balatro has managed to surpass Slay the Spire, which was kind of like the OG.
The OG.
There, tons of them are. I mean, it's loads of developers are being able to make successful careers and make games that are being, very, very good. But when's the next Slay the Spire going to come along? And it probably that may never be surpassed.
Never happen.
Specific. And it will be another genre that we go into. Elden Ring may be the absolute peak that the Soulsborne genre gets to. We don't know. FromSoft have probably got the best chance of being the ones that surpass it themselves. But I don't think there's. Yeah, there is obviously a bit of fatigue and people get tired of everything, right? Because it's popular and. But I think everyone is desperately still waiting for like what's FromSoft's big thing going to be next. Yeah, how are people going to innovate on this? I think that was obviously one of the reasons why Black Myth was there's such a spotlight on it. Originally, obviously, it looked really cool, but it was a completely different take on what people perceived to be a Soulsborne. Obviously, it didn't quite turn out that way. But I think that there's those are the games actually that are probably more interesting to me, like the ones that are kind of leveraging a little bit, but not actually going full on. And there's quite a lot of them, like Where the Winds Meet as well is another one, I think. There's quite a few of these games now. Obviously Stellar Blade was also considered in that vein to a degree too. And they're all doing really well. So it's there is for sure some fatigue, but I don't think it's to the point where people are going to suddenly stop making those kind of games because they're still doing really, really well.
Right. Yeah, even action games that aren't explicitly Souls-likes still have a bit of Souls elements in them to the point of where people will debate whether or not they consider them to be Souls-likes.
Yeah, and I would actually push that. I think maybe the only real Souls-like game not made by FromSoft that's been recently successful is Lies of P. And, Lies of P was sort of a surprising success. It's getting a pretty expansive DLC, that adjusts the whole setting and kind of blows the lore open, all sorts of stuff. And I think what we're talking about is that we're seeing the hybridization of hack and slash and Soulsborne. Sort of, I got to play Phantom Blade Zero last year. It's really much more a hack and slash character action game than Souls. And same with with Black Myth Wukong. Ended up being a very, I felt like Stellar Blade had much more Souls DNA in the way that its actual combat functioned. But in terms of like build variety and stuff like that, Black Myth Wukong kind of had that Souls element a little bit, but just at such a lower degree, and everything else is really what we're seeing is, like Ryan was suggesting, is like people are talking about feeling refreshed at the idea of a good old hack and slash, and this generation of hack and slash is just going to look at the newest things around it to take examples from, and the FromSoft has had that so dominated that there's going to be elements, and every time we think of a difficult game now, we think of Souls as opposed to like Alba in Ninja Gaiden. Like that used to be the metric.
Exactly.
Like that was
and that's what I was thinking. Like people automatically go Soulsborne because a game looks difficult.
Yeah.
And it's like there are so many more aspects to a FromSoft game than just it's difficult.
Right. It's like it's that very and there's everything down to the animation, counting iframes, all that stuff is something so kind of very specific to the FromSoft experience, and not just the Souls experience. So it's almost like that word has taken on a meaning outside of the company itself.
We do have another Soulsborne title coming up pretty soon, and that is Duskbloods, which is going to be exclusive for Nintendo Switch 2 at launch at the very least. So I want to know, are you guys excited for Duskbloods? And are you going to be picking up a Switch 2 at launch? Clarke?
I'm waiting a little bit on the Switch 2 just because I don't need it. I don't need one. I'm excited about Mario. I mean, I might get one. Just we'll see how the Mario Kart World reviews. Mario Kart World is the only app that's selling me on this at all right now, and I'm not negative on Nintendo at all. I think that this is an exciting time. People, big Nintendo fans are excited, and that's fine. I don't foresee this being the good time to release any console, in terms of success. But I don't know how much they need to nail this console, to be fine. I don't think that they're unaware of the market that they're going into. I think they clearly understand that this is a, like as Alana Pierce said, a mature market, and that there's probably no shot that this piece of hardware ever hits Switch 1 numbers, in terms of a killer piece of hardware. They have there's no ands ifs or buts that this is, something to get them through to the next generation. I don't want to say it's underpowered for the generation. It does perform, with less power than other consoles, but it knows what it is, and it feels like it's just very much an iterative thing. Like there's so little innovation that I don't even think they're suggesting that the mouse features or anything like that are so groundbreaking that that it should shape the industry. This feels very much iterative. They know that. As far as Duskbloods go, I'll probably have a Switch 2 by the time that comes out. That's not a launch title. It should, and I'll probably have one by then. And I will try Duskblood. I'm gonna try Nighreign. I don't ever skip a FromSoft title, even if I'm not super excited for it. I'm not super excited for Duskbloods, and I don't know if that's just like an internal resentment because it looked like it was Bloodborne 2, and then it wasn't.
Full on bait and switch.
Yeah, but I'll play it anyways because I'm a sucker for that stuff.
Yeah, it's so funny because I had made like a shit post on Twitter where I was like, exclusive, confirmed by my source that Bloodborne 2 will be announced exclusively for Switch. It was just a joke, and then people were like, oh, and this piece got the inside.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I was just kidding. Oh my god. Darryl, what are your thoughts on Switch 2 and Duskbloods?
I'm very similar to Clarke in that it's I don't see a world in which the Switch 2 will outsell the Switch. I mean, Nintendo have never managed it before whenever they've released a follow-up console. I think the interesting thing this time is that, I mean, obviously the worst case scenario for them is that it's a Wii U. I don't think that's going to happen.
No way. Yeah.
But it could do, right? I mean, my biggest fear was that the problem the Wii U had was that the primary demographic for the Wii was families and parents buying it for their children. And the Switch also has a large chunk of that demographic too. And if you have some kids being like, I really need a Switch 2, and the parents are like, yeah, but isn't that just a Switch? I feel as though that could be a slight barrier for them in terms of like trying to get those extra sales in there. But like, I think it, from the launch lineup, is it like one of the weakest in terms of first party like original titles of any console launch?
Yes.
Well, the past few launches I think barring Wii U, they've had a Zelda game at launch. So for Wii, they had
Or a
Twilight
Mario, right?
Princess. Yeah, and so yeah, I think they had like New Super Mario available for Wii U, and then for Wii they had Twilight Princess, which was cross generation, but it still generated enough excitement where people wanted to play it on the new hardware, especially with the motion controls. And then of course with the Switch, you had Breath of the Wild, and so
And like also
and
like
and
other games too as well, right? Because I think Mario Kart World is the only new.
it's the only new first party title. But it, a lot of people have just really wanted to play Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom at a like reasonable visual fidelity and frame rate for a while, and so I predict that those games, despite their elevated price point and the fact that you have to buy them again, etc., are going to be the biggest system sellers.
Just remember the uproar when with the last generation PS4, PS5, and the
Yeah,
free upgrades, the paid upgrades, and
yeah,
now
the
everyone's just
$10
like,
upgrades.
it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Nintendo gets to
Pay for the
does get
tech
to
demo,
dictate.
pay for
Yeah,
the tutorial.
that's right. That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
God, man. So I'm excited for Duskbloods too, but I also think that what I guess seeing Nighreign, it does kind of emphasize that maybe this is kind of a technical test for whatever is coming next with Duskblood. So hopefully that is the case. I imagine that being more of the and I don't fully know the details behind this, so maybe I'm wrong, but like more of the A-team game. You know what I'm saying? Like with more of the resources
So
and
conceptually,
top
it's
staff.
a single player game, isn't it, as opposed to Nighreign, which is team based.
Yeah, there are PvE elements. Yeah,
Interesting.
So it's more like a straight battle royale, I think,
yeah,
conceptually.
It's very fascinating. And
yeah.
also too the idea of putting that exclusively on Switch too, which I mean, I guess
Yeah.
Switch didn't normally have like good communication, but like they're trying to improve like the actual like real-time online communication for this one, so I guess it
I
could
mean,
be
the
better.
curious thing around it is that obviously all the conversations over the past couple of years have been about how exclusives are really bad and they don't work for anyone and financially they're a bad deal. And Switch 2 has apparently a lot of exclusives. So I like something has to not be correct there.
Yeah.
It,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think still at the end of the day, the the idea of a big company coming in and funding a game for you is and what that equates to in marketing and all that stuff is it's going to be hard for a developer to turn that down, you know, for sure, or even a developer with publishing capacity. They're going to more than anybody understand, that that's a turnkey investment, and they don't. It's something they have to think about less, and so I do see that. I don't think that this is an A team investment game though. Dustbloods. I still do get the feeling that you know that FromSoft is probably working on something really big with their A team that's going to be across all platforms, because as we're starting to see,
Yeah.
the parity is such a big deal, especially for PC, PC
Yeah.
coming across as something that's been helping Capcom generate dominance was really informative. I think that came out. I saw something about that today at the time of recording. Capcom saying that PC
Yeah.
sales really cemented them. For their last few big releases. So, I think the A team games are still not going to be the things that a developer or a hardware developer is going to be able to bankroll. Even Nintendo is not going to
Yeah.
bankroll Bloodborne 2, or Demon Souls 4, this is still like a B team title to me. And the Switch 2, though, I don't want people to think that like the Switch 2 isn't like has nothing to do on launch day. I mean, it does have some good launch titles that are third party, and um, I'm really curious to see how people actually like respond. And I'm very curious to see how many people pick up like Bravely Default, which is a launch day title. And it's one that I've wanted to see succeed. I like Bravely Default, even though it's a remake, but it's largely inaccessible to most people. And so to see the different types of experiences that excel on Switch as opposed to other consoles is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, and like Nintendo, they have their own ecosystem. Essentially, they can kind of operate outside the bounds that PlayStation and Xbox really operate with, because the first party is so strong for them, and people are ultimately going to go where those first party games are, which is how it always really used to be with the older console generations too. And like we've kind of got into a world now where games release on everything. It doesn't really matter which hardware you have, but Nintendo games are still very much like, if you want to play Mario Kart World, this is the only place you can play it. And it's like, it's a weird thing because, I mean, if you think about the PlayStation 5, for example, it took a long time before legitimate PlayStation 5 exclusives really started to appear. You had a couple in the first couple of years, like obviously the Demon's Souls remake, there was Ratchet and Clank, and then, but a lot of them were still cross-generation.
Yeah, even if they weren't cross-platform.
Horizon,
yeah,
there was no explicit reason to pick it up. Whereas Nintendo are kind of off the bat just saying, yeah, like if you want to play our latest software, you have to get the new console. And they're really putting it on the consumer to make a decision, which is how it always used to be, right? It's like there was always a crossover point with the consoles, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 era. Cross-generation releases just weren't a thing. It was only sort of PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, where the publishers started to realize, hold on a minute, maybe we can double dip here a little bit. The people that aren't willing to move over, we can still cater to them. And yeah, obviously it does have a big impact on software sales as well. Would God of War Ragnarok and Horizon and GT7 sell anywhere near as much as they would have done if they were PlayStation 5 exclusive? Probably not. That could have been one of the things that really impacted Final Fantasy 16's ability to do as well, because if that had launched on the PlayStation 4 as well, you could easily see that selling a lot more copies.
Even PC, a simultaneous PC release, I think would have been beneficial to both major Final Fantasy titles, and I think they're at least aware of that now.
Yeah, and picking up of what you said about Capcom, like they announced that 54% of their sales are on PC now, and so console is actually kind of the minority of their sales now, which is nuts.
Yeah.
And the PC market is growing too, and that's another thing where the console market, again, we have to pull in foreboding word mature, because we're in a mature market for console.
Well, the consoles are the entry level, right? It's like you don't need to really do anything. They're much cheaper than building a really hardcore gaming PC. So like if you don't want to have to worry about configuration options and like things exploding or like updating your drivers all the time and all these different things, and it's much easier to just turn it on and play. PC is a lot, it demands a bit more, but obviously there's people now are more and more willing to do so in terms of like building a hardcore rig. The fact that Nvidia is one of the richest tech companies in the world now, it suggests that people are willing to pay that premium for those graphics cards to make their games look amazing. I mean, even Square Enix in their latest investor report talked about how I think PC sales were 30 to 40% of their sales for the last financial year, which was up massively from like 10 to 20% from the previous couple of years. It's definitely a massively emerging hardware market.
Right. So console sales have kind of reached this ceiling, right, with PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2 being the highest selling console of all time, and Nintendo Switch, the first one, might end up eclipsing that slightly, but it doesn't look like it's completely blowing the ceiling open, right? So we have the ceiling at like 160 million units, but it's not like we're pushing past that 160 million units and going into 180, 200 million, etc. So it does kind of look like PC is basically the new frontier for, for developers to put out their games on and to be their day one. Square to be their day one.
Yeah. So the Summer Games Fest is next week, and at the time of this recording, we just got a list of round one of the
Publishers,
and there are some surprising names, and Nintendo's kind of one of them, right? So Nintendo has, like Darryl said, has had its own ecosystem and hasn't really had to present itself at TGS or E3 or any show for years now. It can just do its own thing. It will time its announcements for, announcement season, but it doesn't necessarily need or rely on anything other than just like a general buzz in the industry. And it actually appears on Jeff Keighley's list this year, and I think
specifically
that's
Switch 2, not just
yes,
Nintendo's, just Switch 2.
right? Which is it's out of character for Nintendo to interact at that level, and I think what that could come down to, Jeff has been trying for years, and he's been very public about trying for years to get Nintendo more on board with his show. And I think at this point, his show is kind of the show. Like there's been a lot of kicking and screaming for him to get to this point, but he's at this point now. It's kind of his show's the show. He kind of has a lot of sway about how the industry has its news cycle and its announcements, and they can do whatever they want, but they kind of are now choosing to participate with him. So that's part of it. He's grown rapport with them, but also too, I think this does have to do with, again, what we've talked about. We're at this really bizarre point in the industry of market maturity, right? And so everybody kind of has to get on board. Everybody has to use every tool at their disposal, even Nintendo. And so Nintendo operating on the cycle says as much about the industry right now as it does about Jeff and Nintendo's relationship. And so that's an interesting point, relating to the previous one. But there's some other ones that, like, CDPR is going to be there. That's a big deal. Like, who knows what that could be for? Like, CDPR just announced, that they hit the 10 million copies of Cyberpunk sold. We do know that Cyberpunk is going to be a
Phantom
launch.
Liberty, to be
clear. Yeah.
Yeah,
Phantom Liberty is which is a big deal. Yeah. And we do know that Cyberpunk is going to be on the Switch too, so it could just be something like that. But just the fact that they're there, big deal. That's a big.
I mean, Witcher 4 is really ramping up development now, so it could be that there's something else relating to that happening. Obviously, they did the previous trailer, which had a mass visibility, but was also controversial because people were expecting to see Geralt again, and he wasn't there.
Yeah,
and it feels as though Witcher 4 is going to be a huge property for them, but also they do have to sell certain parts of the fan base on The Witcher 4 still as well. So I'd imagine, like, they're probably going to do stuff around that. They just announced they're working on a new game as well. I think codenamed Sirius.
Mm-hmm. And I really do like, Ryan posted this earlier, that he loves the transparency that you get from CDPR's statements. And, I do too. I think what they're doing is also really, like, indicative of the kind of company that they are in the market. They don't have many projects, but their projects all perform really well. And so that level of transparency is expected from, a low project count company, as opposed to a high project count company, which generally has a little bit more secrecy, in the way that it operates. but shareholders really want like extreme levels of transparency when all of their eggs are in fewer baskets. But it is good to see that they're doing due diligence like that. That's kind of my take on that. The the game that I'm most excited to see more of is a game that's actually just right around the corner, and that's Death Stranding 2. And we know that Kojima is going to be there, and there's always been jokes about Kojima and Jeff being ride or dies, and they do seem to have a good relationship. And then also just they have that similar kind of they know everybody and they like to scan everybody's face. Jeff Keighley was in Death Stranding 1.
Is he in 2?
What's that?
Is he in 2?
I mean, we don't know who's in 2. Kojima said that he scanned so many people, and you see every week Kojima with a new extreme celebrity.
Yeah,
and you just assume they're going to be a prepper. But they said today that they scanned too many people to include in the game, so they couldn't include everybody.
Timothy Chalamet's been cut.
Yeah, Timothy Chalamet's out. Sorry, Hunter Schafer's in. Yeah,
that's so crazy.
I know that Ryan has just started Death Stranding, and I'm hoping that he can. It's of any game, it's one of the hardest to get into. It really is, and I don't. I think the typical story you hear about Death Stranding, at least this is my experience, is that you start it 3 or 4 times before you get to that point where you can actually enjoy it. You get past this, it filters people so hard, but then once you get past a certain point, when you get to the second terrain type, that's where you really start feeling what this is. Even Video Game Donkey has released 2 bad reviews of Death Stranding, and then the third one where somebody from Girlfriend Reviews talked him into finally getting through it. He's like, okay, fine, it's good at the end, and so that's like kind of the typical experience. Darryl, you've played Death Stranding, right?
I have, yes, and I think Kojima is one of the I guess the last auteurs that really are out there. That, I mean, Yoko Taro is another one. I'd say like they just do kind of what they want to do, and it doesn't necessarily play with everyone, but like I think it's just one of those things where it's an experience, and some people are going to vibe with that, some people aren't. I was always a huge Metal Gear fan, but I'd heard like really mixed things about Death Stranding, so I waited for a long time to play it. I didn't play it until last year, and it hooked me pretty quickly, actually. And I just remember, obviously, you do the first kind of climbing up to the incinerator right at the beginning of the game. Trying to get back down again was troublesome. I went into a dead end and I had to come on the way back around again. But then, like, navigating over to like the other side, you go up the hill and you see like the way the community is factoring in with the past that they've led through and how you navigate through, and also the kind of the survival horror. Like the first time you go through a zone, it's so tense. But I got thoroughly invested in the whole thing, and the story it has like elements of just being absolutely nonsensical and just making no sense whatsoever, and but also you kind of get to the end and there's also some weird profoundness to it at the same time, and I'm really interested to see how Death Stranding 2 goes, especially because he's been teasing that it's basically like MGS5 without Konami's overseer involvement.
Right.
Like the fact that he cast, I mean, there was the tweet where the guy who's playing with the bandana, who was like 4 or 5 years ago, you'd be the perfect Solid Snake, and then he's now basically cast him as Solid Snake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like to have that much power as well.
Yeah, he's nuts, man. So my experience with Death Stranding so far, just being like 10 hours in, is that somehow it is both the most boring and most deeply fascinating game I've ever played at the same time.
Yeah.
And
It's so
I don't know how to
reconcile
reconcile
those
those things. Yeah.
Like, going through the zones can be incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just want to get through it. You just want to get through it, and you're so close, and then all of a sudden, it all goes wrong, and you drop everything, and you throw your toys out the pram, and then you just have to kind of pick it back up again and work your way through.
Yeah. But it's really fascinating, and I guess what like keeps me going through it is just that it's nothing like anything I've ever played before. And
Exactly.
there's part of me, there's part of me that's almost like I have to get to the end to figure out why Kojima did this. To figure out why he made this.
That's a good instinct, because I really do think that when you get to the end, that's clear. Like what the game is about really clarifies itself, with, I want to say, the last third of the game, the game's narrative. And there's a moment too, I think at about midway, specifically around the Mama Lockney story arc, that you'll be like, oh, okay, so there's real meaning here. Like there's a real, like, connective tissue between the human experience and the way the narrative unfolds. And then I think that kind of will propel you to get to the end of the story. And what Darryl's saying about one that, he's sort of the last auteur, he has put himself in a unique space. And I think only him and I think Sam Lake are really people that can operate in what you would call a AAA space and be as risky. And Sam Lake has had to be really transparent about the fact that he made a really artistic game with Alan Wake 2, but it took years to make its money back and hadn't made its money back up by the time he won, best director at the TGAs, and almost sweep the awards. Like, he still hadn't broken even on that game. He had to be very transparent about that and say that with Control 2, which is in the Remedy verse, production has had to be streamlined in order to, basically admitting that he can't do what he did. He's going to have to do something a little bit tighter in order to break even. Kojima is sort of the only AAA guy that can say, hey, we're going to throw around big Sony money. I mean, this is a console exclusive for a while. Like, this is the main reason to own a PS5 Pro for a while, is Death Stranding 2. He's the only guy that can really throw around big money on these big risks. But also, just to sort of talk about like the idea of artistry in the industry, independent spaces are full of games like this, full of games that can take these risks. And it's why we're starting to see, like, I don't want to say an indie renaissance because it's still really hard to make a game, but a lot of people are really recognizing like a staleness in the AAA space and looking at independence right now going, give me something new, give me something interesting. And I think that's going to make an interesting landscape. I'm not saying that's good or bad. There's tons of bad stuff about the way the industry is right now. But if you're looking for silver lining, I think there's some there.
Yeah, and like the fact that, I mean, Death Stranding is in some ways like a climbing simulator. it's a very different way of solving problems. Like, you have to navigate like the environment, and I don't know any other AAA game that would be able to take that risk and succeed and go on to have like 20 million copies or players now, I guess is the term.
Yeah.
But like like he has this ability to be able to do that, and obviously Death Stranding has turned into a pretty significant IP now off the back of that. I think because of the way the story works, it really connected with a lot of people. And I mean, I'm like, who knows what Fizzint's going to be like, and his kind of survival horror game that he's working on. But yeah, like, there aren't too many people. Yeah, as you said, indie developers, there's tons of people innovating, come up with really cool concepts, and there have been so many instances over the last like 2 years where indie games have just exploded and taken over the kind of video game radio waves for a couple of weeks. But in the AAA space, it's it's very risk averse. Like, how can we spend as much money as possible without innovating, essentially?
Yeah.
Because we want to try and make sure we make all that money back and then some. And when it works, it really works, right? Because I mean, you have Call of Duty that I think the last one cost about $700 million to make, was the report, but it still made 2 to 3 billion back. So that was a pretty good bet to make in terms of that budget risk. But there are so many other games where it doesn't work.
And it's still wild that like what we consider a risk is pretty. I mean, like we look at Resident Evil as an example of like, wow, what a risky move to go first person for 7 and 8. You know, I mean that doesn't sound that risky. You know, on its like, it's not like that's an undersaturated market, but just within the context, it felt so risky because, you know, these IPs are so precious and they've got so much, you know, pressure to generate ROI that even that's considered a really big risk. So, you know, again, selling a climbing simulator to anybody on a untested engine, you know, was a wild swing, you know, and, you know, and really I do give a little bit of credit to Sony for that, for just handing them, you know, Gorilla's engine on a flash drive. You know?
And they've been pretty good at it as well. I mean, I don't think so much of this generation, but obviously last generation they would be like, okay, Media Molecule, go do your thing. You know,
exactly.
And there are so many instances. I mean, even with Horizon, you know, that was also a huge risk. The studio is primarily first-person shooters.
Yeah,
we're going to let you make a narrative open-world adventure game. You know, and it paid off for them. But now we've got to the point where there's less and less of those really innovative, cool new IPs coming out. It's a lot of sequelitis with Sony's games, reducing the risk. They put all of their bets in live service games, and that hasn't, you know, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next because of that. Because obviously that ate up a good probably 5 to 7 years of their kind of creative pipeline, where they could have been investing the money that was spent on Concord or whatever in other games at those studios. They chose not to, but they're not going to be making those same decisions again, right? They're not going to be having a huge pipeline of live service extraction shooters that are planned to come out in 5 to 6 years' time. So what are they going to have that's planned to come out in 5 to 6 years' time? I think that's the curious thing for me.
I hate to divert this conversation, but I am curious on your take on this, Darryl. Do you think there's a market for live service games anymore, or is that so cooked?
I think absolutely there's a market for it. It's just that you have to knock someone else out of the game to take advantage of it. I think the challenge they have, and the reason why we still get them, is because, you know, if you look at the most played games right now, you have Fortnite, PUBG, Apex Legends, Overwatch, Among Us, yeah. Like there's
Marvel
but
Rivals,
even just within the first person shooter space, there's probably about 10 games that have consistent, strong viewership and playership as well, player base. But there's usually a new one that enters into that cycle every year or two.
Right. Like, so Marvel Rivals is a great example of somebody that knocked somebody else out.
Came out of nowhere and managed to succeed where Concord didn't. And when you get into that space and you can succeed, the return on that is incredible. You know, Fortnite is still making a significant amount of money. PUBG is still one of the most profitable mobile games in China. I mean, Apex Legends and Overwatch still must be making enough for the publishers to keep them going consistently. Counter-Strike is obviously still massive. Mm-hmm. It's still, like, I think every single day it's still the most played game on Steam. So there is definitely I mean, Rainbow Six is still going, right? Rainbow Six Siege is still going. But like, even I mean, Delta Force was a new one that kind of came out. Ubisoft had their new one. The name on it is blanking, which launched. It was the biggest live service launch in history or something. I think they had 6 million players in a month. But that's now been cancelled, I believe, because they couldn't sustain it. And that's obviously the other thing around it. You have to be able to sustain that, because there is a finite number of players. The player base is kind of gradually increasing, but they can only play one or two games. And we're seeing with the fighting game community as well, right? There's a finite number of fighting games, and it kind of rotates who's at the top of the game in that specific environment. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens when the Virtua Fighter re-enters that ring, in terms of like how well that does, and how things go, because Tekken obviously gets a lot of traction, but when you look at the actual tournament scene, it's one of the smaller ones.
Right.
Mortal Kombat is kind of up and down as well.
It's kind of down.
Fatal Fury just tried to come into it, and considering it was the first official Fatal Fury game in like 2 decades.
20 years, yeah.
It did okay.
It did okay.
But also, it didn't do as well as people were expecting it to do based on the level of perceived investment. So I think there's definitely still an environment for it. It's just that you have to come up with something that is going to knock someone else out of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing, but it's also a very high risk thing as well. Like, as consumers, it's great for us because the companies are constantly having to try and come up with the next big thing that is going to surpass the thing that we already like and don't want to let go of. But obviously the companies, there's so much jeopardy there if they fail with that objective. I mean, there was what's the other one that just came out as well? I think it's a Korean game, Fragpunk.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
That's another one. I don't know how well that's doing. But they were also trying to kind of muscle in to that specific space. But it depends on obviously the operating models. How much the money do they need to make every month to be able to sustain the game? Like, not everything needs to be directly competing with Counter-Strike. Just like not everything needs to be competing with League of Legends in that space. Or even in the sports, Rocket League is another obviously huge. FIFA is still huge. There are plenty of these games that exist, but it's so hard to compete against the biggest players in the space. I'm actually fascinated to see what happens with Rematch when that launches next month as well. Whether or not they're able to kind of eat into any of Rocket League's market share, whether or not they're going to create their own space. I mean, the testing that they're doing seems to be like getting a lot of traction. Whether or not that succeeds is going to be an interesting one, especially because it's a massive segue for the developers.
Like one of the terms for live service games used to be lifestyle games. And I found that like a very interesting term because, one can only embody so many different lifestyles before there's no more time left in the day. And the thing about these live service games is that you do have to like put a lot of commitment toward them every day, especially in the gacha
now.
form. Yeah. I mean, so it's like, log in and do these dailies, and then all kinds of other things. Go on.
I mean, if you think about how online gaming was when it first came into it, people just played for fun. Like, there was no matchmaking systems. You just kind of got paired with a load of random people and you just kind of muscled your way through and just had fun, or you didn't. Once they introduced Call of Duty started introducing the rankings and all these different things, and you've got all the different matchmaking engines now that technically put you against people that are a certain skill level, but they're designed to get you to a certain point, and then you hit a ceiling, and then you're going against people that are the same as you, if not better than you, and you're only going to get better in the ranking system if you yourself put the time and investment in. It's like a real sport now. Like, if you want to get better at playing American football or anything like that, you have to put the time in. You can't just play recreationally if you want to get better and get to a certain tier listing or all these different things or ranking level. So they've made it like hyper competitive for everyone. And some of these games have millions and millions of players. There's more people playing some of these shooters than there are actual professional sports. It's so they are hyper competitive, like massively competitive, and also because of that, a lot of people have to deal with those stresses of figuring out or finding out they're not as good as they think they are, right? And
No.
I still remember when I used to play League of Legends a lot, and the notion of ELO hell, and then you realize it's kind of a thing, but not really a thing. It's more of a skill issue on your side. You can try and blame the other people if you want to, but it just means that you're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to comprehend that sometimes, that you're not as good as you think you are, and there's plenty of
Right.
other people out there who are way better than you are.
Right.
And these esports now is huge industries in terms of just coaching. There are so many professionals that will coach now, or coach amateurs who want to get from like iron tier to silver or something in League of Legends, which is so low down on the ranks in terms of the grand scheme of things, but people will just want to be able to get to say, like, I'm silver, I'm that good at the game. And that's enough for them, that they're willing to pay money for someone to teach them how to get there.
That's nuts. I do see those like coaching like things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I am kind of curious like what those things actually do and like what the success rates actually are on those coaching
I think they'd be
programs.
pretty high. Like if you're like a iron level, the things you would need to do to improve yourself are like pay attention to the game. Like it's like they are generally quite small things, so they can have a pretty success rate. I don't know what it would be like from getting from like diamonds to challenger tier. There'll be a very different equation.
What are you expecting for or hoping for from some of these developers that are announced at SGF? Like I know that Capcom is there. Capcom's probably got some stuff to say. There's obviously IOI, which is
James Bond, baby.
interesting. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
They've been teasing it.
We were talking about Mind's Eye is a very interesting project to talk about. What are you feeling?
I think we're in such a strange space at the moment in terms of, from the history of companies. If you go back 25 years to when companies used to talk about things, they would announce their pipeline for like 2 or 3 years out. There would be like 20 to 30 games they're working on. Some of them would have code names, some of them would be legitimate. They'd all have like rough release windows. Whereas now we have a company like Capcom, which is one of the biggest Japanese publishers, and there's one or two games that they have in the pipeline. Very few release dates. Like they're all holding everything very, very close to their chest now. And I think it makes, with Summer Game Fest and things like that, it's so hard to anticipate what these publishers will actually be looking to do because of that lack of transparency around everything. Like if we're looking at Capcom, yes, we are probably due for the next numbered game, but we were also due for another remake.
Sure.
Or some kind of announcement or remake. We're also due for another Devil May Cry game. We could be due for Dragon's Dogma 2 expansion like they did with Dark Arisen. We could be due like another Ace Attorney game. We could be due like there's so many, like they could do something with Dino Crisis. Pragmata still is in the ether somewhere.
Sure.
Like there are so, like if you look at Capcom, if you went down like a bingo list, there are so many possible things that they could announce. It's quite scary now with them as a company, but they're not alone. Like even if you look at like Tecmo Koei, it's a similar situation. They have all of these companies are talking about their ambitions for where they want to get to and what they want to do, but they're very, very obtuse about what they're actually going to do to get it, how to get there. I mean, obviously, Tecmo Koei have just done Dynasty Warriors Origins, which has done really well for them. Rise of the Ronin did really well for them. But they've got ambition. They're launching it. They've created a new AAA studio in their portfolio. We haven't really. I mean, we know that the Team Ninja side has a lot of different teams. One of them is obviously working on the new Ninja Gaiden, but it seems that's a very junior team. Mm-hmm. So, what are the Rise on the Ronin team working on now? What are the Wolong team working on?
Right.
The team that did Stranger of Paradise, where have they all moved on to? They will definitely be working on some stuff behind the scenes because they have that ambition now that I think in the next 3 to 4 years, their ambition is to release a game every year that sells 5 million copies. So what's
Wow.
that game going to be in this financial year? We don't know yet.
Right.
Like, for them, it may be Ninja Gaiden. Maybe that's
Right.
the game that they have signposted to be. And obviously with Game Pass, because I believe it's an Xbox exclusive, isn't it?
Yes.
Or a Microsoft exclusive. They could hit that player mark. Maybe. And maybe
Sure.
the deal they've signed with Microsoft is the equivalent of 5 million players for them financially.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's really hard. I think it's probably the hardest time that I can think of where it comes to trying to anticipate what the publishers may actually be looking to, or what they're working on.
Right.
Because there's so many different avenues that they could be going down, and it's very rare that we have like CD Projekt Red, where they're like, we're working on The Witcher 4, we're working on Cyberpunk 2, and we've got one other codename project that we're kind of concepting right now, and that is it. That is all we're going to be talking about for the next probably 5 to 6 years. Like, this is us. You look at all the other publishers, and it's who knows? It's so, yeah, it's so obtuse. It's very difficult. Like, what do you think? Like, do you have any like big expectations around what we might get? Because I guess there's not too many known quantities at this point that we're going to get more information about at Summer Games Fest.
No, I'm with you. We're due from a lot of the companies from a lot of the companies here, like even PlayStation Studios. Like, what first party titles are we expecting from PlayStation? Right about now.
Yeah,
and they're
Ghost of
really
Yotai
good.
and that's kind of it, right? And obviously Insomniac has a load of projects that are or were known about because of the leaks, but how many of those still exist? I mean, Wolverine, right, you'd like to think would start be getting seen at some point.
Like at some point, it's
where
probably
is that?
It's probably the highest likelihood title I would see from the name PlayStation. But I mean,
at Bend, like, what have they been working after Days Gone? It's like,
right.
There are, like, if you look down the list of the Sony first parties, there are so many that have just been silent for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, Housemarque have announced their title, which is coming out next year.
Sure.
But
I would love to see more. I would love to see more of that too.
Yeah, I mean, Returnal was fantastic.
It was fantastic. Yeah. And Sega's going to make a show, and there's obviously been some Sega stuff, and we'll get into that a little bit later. As far as Capcom goes, though, like, speaking about specifically Resident Evil, because for whatever reason that's just in the air, and I'm not going to validate
People want it.
Yeah, I'm not going to validate any leaks or rumors about that, but from Resident Evil, what are you guys hoping for if it's another numbered title? Do you want it to return? Do you want it to pivot to something more traditional, or something like the RE2 and RE4 remakes, and RE3? I skipped that internally, even though it very, very much existed and was fine. But are we expecting them to stick with this first person or something else? What did you guys think of the first person Resident Evils? I was actually a big fan.
I like it, I do, but like then RE4 remake came out,
yeah,
and the Knife Fairy happened, and I found that gameplay system so strong that it was really hard for me to want to go back to anything else. I also just really like the third person style too.
Yeah,
like,
and Alan Wake too, like, had a similar style, came out too. So I am having difficulty detaching from that.
I think
right, and then you also had like Silent Hill 2 remake that also had a very similar style. So I mean, I like the first person style. I think it is better for the survival horror aspects of Resident Evil. But I think when it actually comes to kind of, what people love about Resident Evil, I think that it actually has a bizarre similarity to Final Fantasy, where people are very much in love with the characters like Leon and Jill and stuff like that. So, while I do think that, 7 and 8 are really awesome games, I just also think that there's part of us that loves seeing the Resident Evil character and the character designs themselves. So
I think the main thing is that they have options, and when you're a company like that, to have options is really, really good. If you look at the sales, like Resident Evil 7 and 8 are still selling really, really well, and so are all of the remakes. And whichever direction they choose to go in, if they make RE9 similar to the remake series, or if they make it a continuation of 7 and 8, it's not a bad decision either way, really, because they've already got pre-built audiences for both of those.
Either, right?
And they've done a fantastic job of building that IP out. Resident Evil is selling as a franchise like 5 to 10 million a year when a new game isn't even released, which is like any kind of publisher's just absolute dream scenario. And so the fact that it's been so long between RE 8 and 9, it does make you wonder what they are going to choose to do. But I think everyone is just like, what are they going to do? Right. And that's the absolute best situation that they can be in. And I think there's going to be a really high degree of excitement as long as they like get the vibe and the story and the lore and everything correct. I very much doubt they're going to go down the action route ever again, in like they did during the 5 and 6 era. So as long as they stick to their survival horror roots and it's got a really good story and it has those suspense-based moments, I don't think it really matters too much which direction they decide to go in. I think people will like it either way because people have been very accepting of both of the new Resident Evil arcs in terms of the game design.
Yeah, which is very rare, right? To have two different gameplay styles basically coexisting in one game, and for the most part, the fan base likes both.
They've kind of done it with Monster Hunter as well, though, because, World and Wilds it's conceptually similar to Rise, but Rise is more accessible, let's say. But they're both incredibly successful games. And so, I'm sure that they're already working on the follow-up to Rise as well. This is going to be, much more digestible and more action-focused than Worlds and Wilds. But like, they seems to be that they're really able to. They've got a handle on how to control these IPs and how to control the different demographic nuances within those IPs. And I think even like Sega are starting to do a little bit with Sonic now as well. Like they've kind of messed up a little bit, but they had that period where the 2D audience was happy and the 3D audience was happy, And like when you're in that situation where you have that, it can't really be a bad thing. And like no matter what direction they choose to go in, I think it's going to be a positive for them. I think people just really want to know what Resident Evil 9 actually is. And it probably, if they do announce it or it happens at some point this year, I can very much see it being one of the most viewed or coming out at the end of a show as one of the most anticipated games that is upcoming, just because of how massive that IP has become now, irrespective of what subgenre they choose to go with.
Right. And the Capcom brand name, which is so just hot right now.
Yeah. RE Engine.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to Sega. I mean, Sega's obviously going to be there, and we did have a couple of things kind of pop up recently. In one of the weirdest kind of confirmations I've seen. Do you want to talk about that, Ryan?
Yeah. So, Persona 3 Reload had like a pretty weird leak that happened around it because basically it was announced because they uploaded a trailer or something to Microsoft's page or like on a Microsoft store, and then that's how it leaked. But then it also leaked before that too, I think, in like one of like Sega's presentations where they were showing internally like videos of like upcoming games, and somehow that got out. And so it's looking like Persona 4 Remake, whatever they're going to call it. I'm personally a big fan of the name Rerun and Rewind. Those are the people are speculating the names will be. But first, it had a website domain registration leak, and that was one thing.
Classic.
But now, voice actor Yuri Lowenthal, known for voicing Yosuke Hanamura in Persona 4, revealed on his Blue Sky account that he would not be returning for Persona 4 Remake. And he said, I asked, maybe even I begged, but they don't want me to come back. So for those that don't know, with the Persona remakes, essentially what they've been doing is that they recast the entire everyone in there. Now, they will also bring those voice actors back, and they will play roles that are more minor. They'll play NPCs around the town, but they won't play their traditional characters anymore. And so they're doing such a hard reset that they're not even going to be casting him, like Yuri, who is like, a huge name in voice acting now. I mean, he's the voice of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And he's not even coming back. So they're doing a hard reset again on all the voice acting. But so it seems like Persona 4 is happening, but at the same time, I'm kind of just like, bro, where the hell is Persona 6?
Sure, but again, I think this is B team stuff. And Persona 6 came out last year. It was called Metaphor, and I like
True.
No, I think I think it's just the weirdest. I feel kind of bad because it's not like a direct, voice actors. This happens, right? Voice actors accidentally do stuff that confirm stuff, and then they have to delete tweets. But this is a weird thing because it's like he got told no, and you rarely get an NDA for being told no. So it's like, did he do anything wrong? Will it kind of be seen as unprofessional? Maybe a little bit. He'll probably tank it because he's Yuri Lowenthal. It's not that big of a deal, but it's one of those things that he sort of accidentally said that can't be taken any other way. So it is a weird leak. But do you think, since we're seeing Sega there, do you think there's a chance we see the P4 remake announcement this early?
I think so, actually. Yeah. I really do. A domain registration kind of suggests to me that an announcement could be happening soon.
I mean, the existence of the project is kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah. Based on the success of Reload and how the franchise has been just generally trending. They want to keep that momentum up for sure.
I also think it's just really likely that we're going to see a flood of titles, right? That are coming out in the last half of the year that we haven't been privy to know about because nobody has known whether or not they're going to do it. Because we were under the impression until last month that Grand Theft Auto 6 was still coming out this year, and that it was going to put a 3-month hole in the entire calendar for every company. Right. So they've all been waiting to figure out when to release games. So I do think it's really likely that we're going to see a bunch of games that we had no idea were coming out this year, as a result.
Yeah. It's
and then
it's been
also
crazy.
too. Oh yeah. Also too, with like Persona 4. Persona 4, also the original, launched 2 years after Persona 3. And essentially, Persona 4 is basically a very deep ROM hack of Persona 3, right?
Yeah.
They changed out the characters and stuff like that, but it's built on the same tech. They reused a ton of assets, and they were able to quickly make a follow-up game after that. And so it seems likely to me that they're taking Persona 3 Reload, actually, and taking a lot of its code and assets, and then making a fairly similar game. Because structurally, I mean, you have the calendar system, you have the town hub. Those are just things that, you kind of have to swap out. And then, you get to Persona 4. The dungeon design, for example, the way the dungeons are generated. Again, very easy to reuse a lot of the stuff that's already done for Persona 3 Reload for Persona 4. So, my estimation is that they probably planned this from the start, that first we'll make Persona 3 and then we'll be able to flip a lot of the code and assets for that directly into Persona 4, and we'll have a similar release pacing to what we had when we released these games back on PlayStation 2, which was 2 years apart. And now
also, scheduling and sequentially, it makes sense to get both of them out before Persona 6 because they'll maximize their audience. Like they'll get as many new people in as possible. And it's like, oh, you like Persona 3 and 4 and you like 5 too. Oh, well, now the next one's coming out like really soon. Like it could be that, yeah, if Persona 4 Remake comes out kind of Q1 next year, Persona 6 is the next financial year. Bam, there you go. And it's been a while since Persona 5, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a while. We're close to almost 10 years now. I want to say 8. It's 2016, right, when Persona 5 came out.
Yeah.
So we're at 9 years actually. God.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yeah.
But it's one of those crazy ones where, despite the fact it's been such a long period of time between the IPs, it's still growing. The IP is bigger now than when Persona 5 released, significantly bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I cannot imagine P6 selling less than P5. Like there's just no way. I just imagine P6 being one of the biggest video game announcements when it happens. I think the trailer is going to blow up, and I think it is going to be like one of the most anticipated games. And I also think it's going to be Atlus's first 10 million lifetime game, because Persona 5 itself is close. It's at 7 million. It's in that ballpark.
Yeah. And
But
the
I
Persona
think
5
that's-
franchise is over 10 million, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Here's what I'll say on that is it depends. Okay.
Yeah.
If it were to if Persona 6 were ready to go and it released this year, I don't think it would do well. I don't think it would do that well. It'll still do really well. This is not the year for it. I really kind of think that this this is a 2026 2027 year would really, like, just the way the market is. Also, just like, I mean, it's weird, but Expedition 33 factors into this a little too, and I don't, I don't like pitting games against each other, but it's just, there's this weird sentiment right now that Persona is a little incompatible with in a big market, just like today for the next 6 months, and so I think 2026, you're right, 100%, 10 million, huge deal. People's hunger will be at a fever pitch, because they don't have Metaphor right behind them. I'm with you.
So, Kingdom Hearts 4 is also one that people are like really hoping for.
So I'm
Games
looking
Fest.
through the post, and it is mostly Kingdom Hearts 4. People saying, "Oh, Kingdom Hearts 4 is coming."
Okay, so Kingdom Hearts people always think that Kingdom Hearts is coming.
I mean, they have to hope for something.
And they always think Kingdom Hearts is coming, and then Kingdom Hearts doesn't come. Do you guys remember, was it last year when Jeff basically, like, I don't know, he made like some type of joke, and it just upset people because they thought that Kingdom Hearts was going to be there.
Was it
And then when
Kingdom Come 2 Deliverance?
No. Before that, even.
Oh, yeah.
Before that, even, and then people were like, they kind of set themselves up there too, because there was like a compilation of Kingdom Hearts fans just reacting to him saying "Kingdom," and they just stood up like this, in their chair, like,
That's right.
yeah. So a voice actor had disclosed his involvement with the game on Twitter, and so a lot of people are thinking, okay, so they're already recording English voice acting for this game. That tends to indicate, especially in a Japanese game, that, okay, maybe this thing is coming soonish.
Maybe. Maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think.
I would. Yeah.
I think now the pipeline is a lot larger. I mean, you had, like, Ben Starr said that he was working on the voice recording of Final Fantasy 16 for 4 years, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just because someone's working on it, I mean, he could have said, what was it, like 2019 that would have been. I've started working on it, and people would have been like, oh my god, it's coming out next year. Well, no, it's actually not.
Yeah. Maybe so.
I think that the choice to release a few screenshots was a last minute response to the community outcry over the cancellation of Missing Link, which I don't think any of them would have actually invested in a reasonable amount of way, but people just want something, right? And those all of the screenshots were so minimal in how much information they really conveyed to us, and really only one like piece of Disney was shown, and that was Mickey. And that's something that we expect and isn't new to the franchise. I
Yeah.
think the main roadblock to the release cycle is always going to be Disney. And I think people are forgetting that this is a Disney game. And so I don't expect to see Kingdom Hearts 4 show up surprisingly at any game show. Like, I think if the next time we see Kingdom Hearts 4, we're going to know it's coming, and it's going to be like, there's going to be a Kingdom Hearts show. It's going to be, I don't know, from this place or this place, and the devs are going to let us know to look for it. That's really what I think is the next time we see Kingdom Hearts 4. Now, Square Enix is on this list, and when as soon as people see Square Enix, if you're looking through the comments, you're seeing that Square Enix being on the list has people looking for part 3 of the remake project and Kingdom Hearts 4. I think the most likely thing that we see there is something related to the remake's port to the Switch, or
Power
maybe,
Simulator.
or some project that they're, like the last few times I've been to Summer Games Fest, what I've actually indulged in from Square Enix has been projects that they're publishing, not necessarily developing. Like Power Wash Simulator as an example.
They have just announced Power Simulator 2, I believe.
Yeah, so I mean, I would really expect something more like that. I'm not trying to dash anybody's dreams, but I just don't. It seems like this. Believe it or not, it seems like this is going to be a really full show of other stuff, and so I think SGF's going to be a good show. I think it's going to be one of the better SGFs in a while. Like, we're not getting some of that. Like, Jeff does have a tendency to like tell on himself a little bit when a show's not going to be that big of a deal. Like, he'll be like, hey, not too many games this year, like he'll say that, and like, he won't
it's
be
in
announcing.
His best interest, isn't it? It's like he wants to try and temper expectations, so people don't go in with massive hype and expectations, and then they hate the show.
Yeah, and he's not doing that this year. He really thinks he probably has some kind of good show. I don't think that we can look reasonably at anything that Square Enix has publicly said in the last year and say, let's predict Kingdom Hearts 4 or Final Fantasy 7R Part 3 at Summer Games Fest. I think that is, very unlikely. And, there's also those NVIDIA leaks that, still are things that people talk about. And Square Enix has never commented on those because it never has had to. And so I don't expect, like, let's say there were projects associated with that were true at one point. If they were no longer true, Square Enix would not be obligated in any, reasonable sense to respond to that. I mean, other than the fact that the court of public opinion is out there and they just assumed all of that stuff was real, so if you're Square Enix and you're in this position, it's tough to decide, do I address the leaks or do I just not acknowledge them? And like really, as hard as it is to accept for us, the consumer, the most responsible thing they can do in a business sense, in a business space, for all of their other developers, all of the other publishers that they work with, is not acknowledge the leak. Like that is probably what any business advisor would tell them to do. Don't even mention it. It's not in their best interest. Maybe the consumer feels cheated out of it, but the other people that they work on and rely on their secrecy aren't going to want them to operate that way. So my expectations for Square Enix are, I think, reasonably, I don't want to say low, but I think that it's right for them not to be actively doing anything. That's where they've said they are, and that's where I should think they are.
Yeah, I mean the investor report very clearly said they expect to make, I think, reasonably less money than they did this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like there aren't too many publishers right now that are forecasting a downturn in revenue. Square Enix are one of those companies that are saying, yes, we are proactively going to make less money this year than we made last year, but they're just going to try and be more profitable. That's their objective right now. They're just trying to make the company more profitable.
And what's a good, really profitable project? The recently announced Dragon Quest HD2D, which got an announcement independent of this show.
It's dropped it on Twitter.
Yeah.
No, and that's like the really smart thing to do. And if you look at their lineup for what they have planned, it's remake after remake after remaster. So it's like nothing but that. But all of those projects are, they're very cheap to make relatively to a brand new game. Yeah. They're also incredibly profitable and guaranteed to sell. And so, it's better to make Bravely Default remaster than it is to make some brand new IP or something else that's higher risk. And so in terms of turning a profit, an easier profit, yeah. Now it also probably won't reach as high as what a brand new game would do, or like what Bravely Default 3 would do. But it's a guaranteed safe bet for them.
Yeah, it's something to tide them over until they're ready to start showing the world what they're actually planning to do in the next 3 or 4 years' time, right?
Yeah, and it's got to be good. It's got to be good, because I don't think they can afford another situation like a lot of the mishaps they had in the early the entire PS3 generation, and then the early PS4 generation, where they kind of started off rocky again. And then I think toward like late PS4 with like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Square kind of, maybe really near Automata, even though that wasn't internally developed by Square, they started to like really get their bearings back. And then Dragon Quest, and then Final Fantasy VII Remake, and toward the mid end of the PS4 generation, that's when Square started to actually put out titles again on consoles that were pretty suitable and well liked, and kind of got that praise that they had basically went a whole generation without. So, all right, I gotta ask though, to round this out, what game do you want to see, but realistically, it doesn't have a chance in hell in actually showing up? I'll go first on this. I'll go first on this because it's easy. It's easy. Persona 6. Persona 6, like I want it so bad, dude. That's like my most anticipated thing right now, other than maybe Cyberpunk 2 and gosh, no, I really can't think of anything else that like realistically stands out other than Cyberpunk 2, which again I think they said it has like 85 developers on it, so that's not showing up anytime soon. And P6 for me for sure. I loved P5. P5 I got into over COVID, and then after that I went into just like an absolute Persona binge, and it became one of my favorite JRPG series of all time. It's right up there next to Final Fantasy for me. And I'm just so curious what they're going to do next for Persona 6, because I feel like, with 5, you went to Shibuya, which is like, kind of the apex of Japan for a lot of people, right? Like how much cooler does it get than that?
Than Shibuya,
so setting... Yeah, like I don't even know like where else in Japan you go to after that. Maybe like Kyoto or Osaka or somewhere else like that. But I'm just like, it's going to be really interesting setting wise to see what they end up doing. There was, ironically, a very funny rumor in hindsight. It was a 4chan rumor on
Mm-hmm.
Persona 6 where people were joking that it was going to take place in France. And now I'm just thinking, like,
Oh
that guy
man.
saw an early build of Expedition
Oh
33 and was
man.
like, "Oh, this is Persona 6."
Yeah.
ironically, ironically, if they do launch it this year or next, I would be like, this is actually perfect timing because Expedition 33 just made France cool.
There you go.
I'll let you take it from here, Daryl.
Um, I'm not too sure actually. I mean, like, I would absolutely, I would love it if they announced like Remake Part 3, just because it means we'd be getting the conclusion sooner rather than later. Um, like, just remember,
We're all with you. We're all with you. And you know, I'm probably the biggest rider of the remake, but please, can we just get that past
yeah.
our
Yeah.
life? Yeah.
Other than, I mean, like, there are a couple of Sony studios that I'm really curious. Like we mentioned, Bend. I think Days Gone was a, like, by the end, all the fix-ups and everything was a fantastic game, and I'm really curious to see what they do next after that. I mean, Naughty Dog. I know, like, The Last of Us Part 2, which I haven't played, was kind of hit and miss for some people, but you know, Uncharted was a fantastic franchise, and I think Intergalactic has some potential. They haven't really shown that potential yet, so they could use this to start talking more about that game and what that may actually look like. And then, yeah, Capcom. I think, like, if we were going for like a dreamy, it would be they announced the Dino Crisis remake. Just get it out there. There we go. It's everyone knows it's going to happen at some point. Just when? When's it going to happen? Go on, Clarke.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Clarke, let's hear it.
Okay, so this is crazy to say, but every time I see Steam specifically on a list, I just can't help. I can't help it.
Don't say it.
It's
Don't
gotta
say
be.
it.
I want to see Half-Life 3 so bad as like a thing. I don't want my life to end before that comes out.
They did the documentary and everything, teasing it, but could it just be Deadlock?
I mean, where do you? I don't. Yeah, the amount of pressure
Oh,
on Half-Life 3 to exist is so high, and for
was
it
it
to
Steam?
be
Is it Steam or Valve?
Valve.
Because obviously there is, like, the rumors about Steam going to Xbox.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
But I know what you
that
mean
could
though.
be
It's like
interesting.
the Half-Life 3 is the utopia.
I mean, if
No.
I, yeah, I mean, well, Steam and Valve's relationship is obviously like this, but and I don't think Valve actually ever lists itself as its own thing anymore. It usually lists itself as Steam. Like everything you buy, it says Valve Corp, but it's still Steam. But I have heard the rumors about Xbox. That'd be like we could do a whole thing about how wild it is that Games Pass is now this thing that actually really adjusts the way that sales are perceived in the industry. Looking at like the 2.2 million players of Doom Eternal, and only under a million sold. And so they were able to claim 3 million players. That's a whole thing we could do maybe afterwards. But other than that, like the thing uh, I really want to see is probably Intergalactic. I want to see what that actually looks like. Um, I have a I had a really averse reaction to the Last of Us show, the Last of Us season 2 show. Last of Us 2 was my personal game of 2020, even though Remake came out. I really liked the narrative direction they did, and so I've been kind of a ride or die. I like Last of Us season 1, the HBO show, and now I am so mad. Like Ryan's been on the journey of the show with me, and like I get so mad I can't even talk about it. So I want to have some good faith restored. But usually when Insomniac is going to show up, at these shows, it gets its own thing instead of PlayStation Studios. It gets its own little marquee. It did in 2019. I'm looking through the history. So if they are, it's going to be a surprise. But that's not it's not the first time that's happened. They do always call this round one, and then they announce more as things go on. So things could happen, between here and then. And also, there's been times when Jeff has pulled a trailer or added one, a day before the show, so you never know what's going to happen. But I think the big thing I'm probably expecting from the show is going to be around Resident Evil. I think that's the most likely big showstopper announcement that we get from the actual SGF show, and maybe the surrounding media,
Yeah, for sure. I think that's going to be like the big reveal. Mm-hmm. And that's what everyone is going to be talking about. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. You can find myself and these gentlemen's channels at the link in the description below. And I guess we'll see you all next time. Later, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye.